Hi, my name is Ray.
Hi, this is Michael.
Welcome to another episode of Ray's Economics Clue Book. Today, we're talking about our trade deficit and restrictions.
Alright.
So let's look at our trade deficit. Historically, U.S. From the 50s to about the 90s, we had really in our, I guess, a more traditional economy per se. We didn't really have much of a trade deficit. We were more or less balanced, and also our trade overall volume was pretty low compared to now. And so there's one thing. So we were relatively more isolated too. And so during this time, we saw our trade deficit was very low, with the exception of a kind of a dip in the 80s, which relatively was high at that point, at $100 billion compared to our GDP at that point.
Oh, it's a huge percentage.
Yes, mainly due to countries like Japan, perhaps, and other. We also, of course, the 80s were a very tense economic period for U.S. United States.
Yeah, Japan and Germany, for example. Okay.
And then we see it climb near to zero again until about 2000 or so, near 2000 or so, where we signed NAFTA, the Clinton administration. And NAFTA was a historic moment for the U.S. economy, and a controversial moment as well. And mainly because it caused our trade deficit to absolutely rocket. Our trade deficit reached basically unprecedented levels, and then it would go down even more to even more unprecedented levels later on, especially with China basically entering trade through the World Trade Organization, becoming a major player in the world economy, and this caused our trade deficit to double basically to around 800 billion.
Yeah.
But if you would notice, our trade deficit, especially during the 2008-09 recession, usually decreases by a lot. The reason for this, not because our exports necessarily go up. They may go up, but although in this case they went down, but our imports go down even more. And why is that?
Yeah, because actually, in the financial crisis, I mean, everyone becomes much more poorer. Therefore, they don't have the purchasing power. Okay, it's not just for the United States, but for the global trade. Actually, in 2008 and 2009, shrink substantially. Okay, so again, I want to just pinpoint a little bit. NAFTA actually was signed around 1996. So then you can plummet, right? So the trade deficit actually substantially increased, and then China into WTO in 2002. Then it's actually another recession, right? And again, you can see almost double. So the major players again, for the trade deficit in 1980s is about Japan and Germany, and in the 1996 about the NAFTA is about Mexico mainly. Okay, and then since 2002, China becomes the biggest contributor. So
is the trade deficit a problem, or is it even beneficial to the United States economy? And it's a problem that's been debated heavily recently in the United States, especially with the President Trump administration. We see trade deficits. There's a very interesting question, and it has a lot of pros and a lot of cons, perhaps. The cons is that obviously it's detrimental towards domestic employment and domestic growth of employment.
The GDP,
Yes, mainly because when we see a lot of imports, we're also going to see a lot of jobs outsourcing to other nations. We still have nations such as with cheaper labor, such as China, Mexico, things like that, which also may bring up ethical concerns as well. And so we also see, as we see imports from other countries, they can dominate and drive out producers within our own domestic market, which of course further decreases employment domestically.
Yeah, of course. We also notice that the net trade deficit is part of the GDP, right? So that when the trade deficit goes higher, then the GDP actually goes lower. Other things being equal.
And trade deficits usually result from an overvalued dollar, which depending on who you ask, can also be a problem, or not a problem, perhaps, depending on who you ask. Because a dollar, if a dollar is overvalued, that means, or high in value, that means other countries' goods are relatively less expensive compared to our dollar, and so we will probably see our imports rise. And then, of course, once our deficit increases, this then implies a low national saving because we're spending a lot of money, and because we see a decrease in the current account but an increase in the financial account of foreign investment. And finally, with trade deficits, we see execution problems and trading frictions because we see a lot of trade volume and then trade issues, perhaps with other nations due to government involvement within trade. But our pros is that, of course, with a deficit, we see a surplus somewhere else.
So it's in the financial account surplus means a trade deficit. Okay, so which means actually we export the US dollar, right? We export a lot of US dollar to other governments or other foreign nationals, and basically they hold it. Actually, it's already an implicit investment into US. Okay, regardless they invest back to United States as a treasury bond or invest in US, business or invest to other countries. Doesn't matter. Okay. Also, that implies a higher US income.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would say trade deficit is maybe a problem, but low national saving probably a big problem because usually that implies what? A higher debt.
Yes, and also over trade deficit we see because, as Michael mentioned, we have more U.S. dollar overseas. This makes U.S. dollar a more powerful global reserve currency, which of course gives U.S. more significant influence and control over the world economy and foreign affairs.
Sure.
Which is very valuable politically and economically.
Sure.
And so with tariffs, we can see there are one method that can cause friction in trade, and one method the government uses to perhaps restrict international trade and help domestic producers.
Yeah, to reduce so-called trade deficit, like President Trump is now doing.
So let's look at this graph. We have domestic supply and demand, then we have the world price. The world price is significantly lower than the domestic equilibrium price, which means that a lot of producers domestically will go out of business because they cannot afford to produce at such a low world price compared to the lower prices in other nations. However, with a tariff, we see our world price basically increases. Maybe not to the level of our equilibrium price originally, but to a level where more domestic producers can enter the market at a higher price. However, while more domestic producers can enter the economy, which is a benefit towards our domestic supply.
Sure.
Our domestic consumers or demand or buyers per se, they suffer the consequences of a tariff because once they face higher prices. The higher prices also leads to deadweight loss because we see our overall surplus is now decreasing with a tariff. The blue part here represents our tariff revenue, which is this part is our tariff revenue. The blue part and the rectangle below it is our tariff revenue, but the brown parts are deadweight loss, our loss in overall surplus, which mainly is felt in this case probably through consumers.
Yeah, because there are three players here. There is consumers, suppliers, and government.
Yes.
Okay, and then if there's no tariff, and then it's only suppliers and domestic consumers, right? When there's a tariff here, then you can see domestic consumer become loser.
Yes.
Because some consumer out of market, they cannot afford it.
Yes.
Then domestic supplier seems like a winner.
Yeah.
Okay, because some old business they go back to market, right? And then government seems like a winner because first they don't have any tariff revenue. Now they have a blue rectangle revenue, right? Yeah. But overall, all three parties surplus added together from economic analysis, we can see there is actually a deadweight loss.
Yes.
Okay, that's these two light brown triangles. Okay, we're not gonna go to details, but we're going to review those concepts again in the macroeconomic analysis later on.
And of course, another method of restricting trade is a quota. And quotas usually are not applied directly, perhaps, but they're through other indirect methods that essentially do the same thing, just as a license requirement or regulations that basically will reduce our overall volume of trade.
Overall the import.
So we have the same graph here, but we see the world price and the domestic supply and demand here. Yeah. And we see here, with a quota, basically we cut off imports here at this mark, and then from there on we have to purely rely on domestic supply, which of course then again also increases domestic producers in the economy because our overall equilibrium price and then increases with the quota. Maybe not to the same level of a tariff, although depending on how restricted the quota is, it can still increase the price a lot to help domestic suppliers. And so we see our overall imports was originally this gap right here, but now it is a lot smaller, and this gap now is now the overall imports with the quota. So we see our quota basically reduces our imports by a significant margin.
Yeah, with limit on the imports, still the same effect because some local suppliers get into the market with a high price.
Yeah.
And some domestic consumer get out of the market because they cannot afford it.
Yeah.
So overall, the consumer shrink of the consumer surplus and the change of the supply surplus is still a deadweight loss.
Yes.
We're not going into the details here, but from in the future macroeconomic analysis, we're going over that again. Okay. So
So for a final clue, the trade deficit has many pros and many cons, and overall, whether or not it's a good problem or not is still debatable today. And so obviously we see a friction often occurs with trades because of an automatic market solution for a trade deficit and surplus.
Yeah, because of course in the ideal market, if US has such a titanic a trade deficit, then the US dollar will quickly depreciate, right?
And so
it's automatic.
And so the government can also often be involved for political reasons in trade with import quotas or tariffs to help both domestic suppliers, but also as a cost to other suppliers and cost to consumers.
Yeah, as we discussed again, it's actually those costs we can summarize as deadweight loss, right? Deadweight loss in the macroeconomic analysis is almost a guarantee because when the free market, free demand and supply being distorted by external factors, that's going to cause overall a loss. Okay, to all three parties. Okay, total. So today we're just discussing those international trades, and in the next few episodes we're going to talk about the forex market, which can also influence this international trade practice. Let's see you next time. Bye bye.